Fine, fine. I'm very happy to introduce our illustrious speaker today, and I'm not using the word illustrious loosely as it often is. You'll soon know why, because he is one of the leading estate and succession planners of today. He has the qualifications, definitely, because he's a chartered um, trust and estate planner from American Academy of Financial Management. He has got the experience. He has had more than 2 decades of experience with almost all the financial products that are available. And besides, he has worked with a very, very wide range of people as well, leading people like ICICI Bank, Aditya Birla Mutual Funds, Tata Asset Management, Reliance Capital, Asset Management, and Universal Trustee. So you can see that his bandwidth is also very, very large. He has also founded his own company, which is Plan My Estate Advisors, and this has been in existence since the last couple of years. And he advises on a lot of different aspects for family businesses, for business families, intergenerational estate planning and legacy planning, family constitution, business succession. And he has trained also. He does a lot of training as well with various banks. He trains a lot of teams from various banks. I think also it's the qualitative aspect of passion, which I think he has plenty of, and which we are going to be witness to today. And for all this, he has been recognized as well. He has been awarded by the Times Group with the Times leading icons of 2021. So this is why today, fellow Rotarians, we have an extremely illustrious speaker with us, who is willing to share his experience, give us his guidance and advice. Welcome, Mr. Shailendra Dubey, and we really look forward to today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sucharita ma'am, and thank you, Mr. Punjabi, for giving me this platform. So I look forward to this session. While I do have a presentation, but feel free to ask questions in the Q&A session towards the end. So very briefly, what I'm going to talk about is basics of estate planning. Very quickly, we'll understand what estate planning is all about, what are the various tools used, and then we'll in detail talk about the trust part of it. So I'll just share my screen. Okay, there you go. Okay, so let's start with basic understanding. A lot of you might be already knowing what estate planning is all about. It's basically anything and everything one does to pass on their wealth, their estate to the next generation. So all the steps which we take, which could be making a nomination or having a joint account holding or anything that we do so that our well-earned wealth is passed on to the next generation is something we call as the estate planning. So along with that, there's another word used which is called as a succession planning, which more or less is similar, but slight difference is that in case of a succession planning, it is more to do with the role with the business. So let's say there's somebody who's running a business and he needs to undertake who takes care of the business after him. So that's the succession planning bit of it. So how do we pass on our wealth? One is which most of us do, and if not, then we should certainly do this, have a joint account holder in our account and add nomination. So if it's a single account, then for sure you should add nominee. If not, then even in a joint account, you should still have a nominee, because let's understand what nomination is all about. Nomination is basically a facility given by our banks or our investment companies, so that in case of a demise, immediately after doing certain documentation, the money is provided to your nominee, which basically means that while all the process of probate or letter of administration or whatever the legal process is still happening, the money will be available to the nominee provided. Otherwise, the whole process can delay. So now the nominee may not be the ultimate beneficiary. While most of us know that nominee is only a custodian and nominee is only a trustee, so nominee's job is to collect the assets given by the bank or the investment company and pass it on to the legal heirs. But a lot of time our near and dear ones, our spouse, our children are the beneficiary. Hence, if we make them a nominee, then we're actually giving the money to the ultimate beneficiary, and the money is immediately available. So nomination is very important. We should do through a will. I'll touch upon the will very quickly in the next slide. Through private trust, that's the one I'll talk about in detail. What are the various usage of private trust? What are various kinds of private trust? And we'll see in which circumstances how private trust can be used. Family settlement, we know a bit of it. Basically, the family enters into some kind of arrangement, some agreement, and they agree that this is how the wealth will be distributed. So I'll not get too much into detail of that. And finally, the operation of law, which is what I think almost 95% of Indians do. They don't do anything, which means that the law applies. Okay, so you don't write a will, you don't create anything. The money would go as per the succession law. So depending on which religion you are, under which act the marriage has happened, and there are certain other criteria, based on that a law would be applicable, which is called as the succession law. So just to understand it very briefly, let's say if a Hindu male passes away without writing a will, without giving his testament, then his wealth would be distributed equally between his children, his wife, and his mother, which may not be the objective. Because let's say if somebody leaves behind the 10 crore rupees and he may want 70-80% or maybe 100% of that to go to his wife and the rest to children, or maybe to children after the wife goes. But in this case, what would happen that the 25% would go to child one, assuming that he's got two child, 25% would go to child two, 25% to his wife, and 25% to mother. So if they are minor, then there's another complication of where the mother would act as a trustee till the time they become a major. And if it's a property, then she will find a difficulty in selling them if there's a need for that. So keeping that in mind, one should definitely do some part of something with estate planning, at least writing a will. And in case of certain cases, a trust is advisable, which we will look at in the next few slides. Okay, so very quickly, what does will mean? I'm sure you must have heard about it. You must have attended a session. It's basically writing down all your desires related to your wealth, who will get what proportion, distribution, whom you want to disinherit, what you want to be given to whom. So that's all basically covers your will. You can keep it confidential because you write in a piece of paper, keep it in your locker, nobody would know. While it is advisable that one should as far as possible discuss with the legatee, because most of the time I've seen that the dispute happens when the expectations are not met. So when you have situation where somebody is expecting a part of the wealth and that doesn't go, the chances of dispute. But having said that, confidentiality can be maintained. It gives a provision to provide for minor children. That's an important, because many a times when children are young, they will not be able to manage their wealth. And if God forbid something happens to both the parents, then you are in a situation where the child is getting the money, but who will be able to take care of that? So the will provides you provision to appoint a legal guardian. So legal guardian could be any extended family member, any friend, who would be able to take care of the child. So that's again you can do through a will. Okay, you can deal with offshore assets through a will. You can write in a will. You may do a separate will for offshore asset or the same will. And of course, supporting a cause which is close to your heart. So to philanthropy or any other objective which one may have, one can do through the will. One or two important point for a will to be valid, there has to be three things. Point one, it has to be signed, needless to say. Point two, it has to be witnessed. Okay, so the witness is very, very important while doing the will, and that to two witnesses. And again, the witnesses should not be any of the beneficiaries. Okay, and eventually there has to be something to pass on. You need to write the asset or the wealth which you want to be passed on. Okay, so it's very important to have this part of the detailing done when you are doing a will. As I said, anybody can do a will till the time is a major and is of a sound mind. the will is a very basic and very important and very preliminary document which one should definitely do. So let's move on to the next topic, which is what is going to be the main topic of today. Let's understand what trust is. Okay, trust is an obligation annexed by the settler. So there are three components to a trust. Component number one, the person who's creating a trust. We call that person as the settlor. The beneficiaries, people who are going to get the money, and the trustees. Okay, so three of them come together and make a trust. Again, settler is the person who creates a trust. Trustee is the one who manages and takes care of the trust, and beneficiaries are the named beneficiary in the trust. Okay. Now, so trust is basically an agreement between a settler and the trustee, where a settler says that, look, these are my assets. This is what I want you to do. So there's an agreement which happens, which is called as basically a trust deed. Through a trust deed, which binds the settler and the trustees, and the objective of that agreement is written in the trust deed for the benefit of the beneficiary. So that's in nutshell to understand what trust is all about. Important point here to understand is that whenever one person creates a trust, the assets actually move from an individual ownership to the trust ownership, which means that the ownership changes. This is very important to understand because in the subsequent slide, I'll talk about how does this change of ownership helps us in achieving certain important objectives in life. And we'll see that. And then the assets which are lying in the trust are basically you can transfer your liquid assets, you can transfer your property, your jewelry, basically all kind of assets can be transferred into the trust. There are two types of trust, private and public trust. We will talk about private trust in this. In public trust, basically the public at large is the beneficiary. In private trust, there are defined beneficiaries. There are defined, let's say, a family member, they are named or their lineage is named. So that's the private trust. Okay. Now let's also understand what are various ways the trust can be categorized. One is based on how would the distribution happen, which means that who would get what part of the benefit. So it can be categorized either as a discretionary trust or determinate trust. In the discretionary trust, the discretion is given to the trustees to make the distribution as they deem fit or as they decide, or as the instruction given by the settler, which may not be a binding one. Okay, but the discretion lies with the trustees. So let's say if I have named, if there are 5 people named as a beneficiary, what percentage of the wealth and at what frequency the distribution would happen from the trust, the decision is taken by the trustee. So the beneficiaries do not have the right saying that so much percentage of the wealth is lying in my trust. Next is, which is opposite of that, determinate or definite trust. In this kind of a trust, the settler specially writes that a particular beneficiary has a so much percentage in the trust. So let's say if I have 2 beneficiary, I'll say 50-50 or 60-40, or if I have 3 beneficiary, I define exactly what percentage of wealth or which wealth will go to which beneficiary. So discretionary and definite or determinate are the two ways to distinguish the trust. Second is the power of revocation. So one is revocable, the other one is irrevocable. As the name suggests, the revocable trust will give a power to the creator of the trust, which is the settler, to make the changes in the trust deed and also wind up the trust as and when he deems fit. Now, this is very important because a lot of time I meet a settler and say, so I like to make a revocable trust because I am have a full liberty to do with the trust deed. I can make changes, I can wind up. But mind you, there are certain objectives which we may not be able to achieve if we create this kind of a trust. And then also there are certain tax complications. Hence, which one, determinate or discretionary, revocable or irrevocable, has to be decided based on the objective. And certain other parameters, tax aspect has to be looked at before we finalize what is the combination which would work for you. Irrevocable, as the name suggests, cannot be revoked. It can only be revoked or winded up only in the way the trust deed says. So there is a separate part of the trust deed which talks about the termination of the trust. Okay, that will deal and will capture how the trust would be revoked. Another point, the power of the revocation is only with the settlor, which means the creator of the trust is the only person who can wind up the trust. After his life or her life, this revocation cannot be done by the anybody else, but the trust is under power of the trust deed. So the revocation power lies only with the settlor. Private trust, public trust, I have broadly talked about the limited or the defined beneficiary, and in case of public trust, basically public at large. Now let's move to the important part of the discussion, and this is the most crucial part, and I intend to spend larger part of the time on this part of the discussion. Why to have a trust? I mean, is trust required for me, or will is good enough? What is that objective which I will achieve if I make a trust? So questions like, is making a trust too difficult? What are the compliances? Okay, how do I find the right trustee? So there, I'm sure there are a lot of such questions which are in your mind, and feel free to ask all that after the end of my session. But I'll try to cover as much as I can as I go along. Uh, so first and the foremost benefit, and this to my mind is one of the important benefit in the Indian context, is that all the wealth assets transferred in the trust during life, irrespective of which kind of trust it is, revocable, irrevocable, doesn't matter, will not be subject to any probate or any other court process. So when, just to make this slightly more clearer, when a person passes away, the legatees will have to obtain certain documents, which can be a probate order, or if there's no will, then letter of administration, or in some cases, succession certificate. So there's a whole process of claiming those documents, and there's a whole process of getting those court order. So all the assets which has gone into the trust will not be subject to this. So what I'm trying to say is, on the demise of the creator of the trust, on the very next day, or 1 year or 5 year, as in when the settler wanted, the assets will be given to the named beneficiaries in the way desired and captured in the trust deed, or a separate letter given by the creator of the trust, without any documentation, rather without any court process, without, so the whole delay, the whole dispute which happens in the family, and I've seen a lot of them where after the demise of the main patriarch, the family gets into a very dirty fight, and all kind of things come out in the public. So a lot of wealthy people, or many people who feel that they do not want this whole thing to happen, you will see that they would have created a private trust. So one of the main objective of doing that, they do not want this court process, they do not want this beneficiaries fighting in the court for the assets lying in the trust. That's important. Only the assets which are lying in the trust, not the assets which are still lying in his or her name. So during your life, whatever assets you've been able to transfer into the trust, that is the one which can be passed on to the beneficiaries without any kind of a court process. Skipping generation, this is again something which I see a lot of people want to do, especially where there is a lot of money and they feel that the next generation are capable enough, or they have been taken care of, they're doing well. So many patriarchs want to actually skip a generation and provide the larger part of the wealth to the subsequent generation. Maybe an income from the assets can go to the immediate generation, but the subsequent generation, they may want to pass on the corpus part of it. So that can be done through a trust, because in a will, you can basically will to the person who's available. You can't will that 2 generation after I'll give it to ABC. That won't be possible. That won't be implementable. Okay, but in the trust you can actually say that only on a subsequent generation, or only the next generation would be getting the income, and the corpus is for the third generation or fourth generation. So that kind of a planning can be done, and many families I've seen want to actually provide for the medical or education, or any other important expenses in the family through this trust mechanism. So the intergeneration transfer of the wealth, to my mind, is one of the very critical and one of the main objective for why people should create a trust. If you are somebody who have a decent amount of wealth, do not want your legatees to go through the whole court process. You foresee there could be some delays or dispute, or for that matter, the legatee may not be in India to do all this court process. I did a trust for a family where everything was amicable, everything was fine, but the children, both of them, were living outside India, and they didn't wanted to do the whole court process, coming here, spending time. Okay, so they said, okay, let's make a trust and put assets in the trust, and immediately on the demise, these assets come in certain entity, and some assets come directly. So depending on what's your objective, you can capture that in the trust deed, and then these objectives can be achieved. So uh, intergenerational transfer of wealth, as I said, is the important part of it. Let's move to the second point, which is asset protection and ring fencing. And now this is getting, I mean, it's actually reality of life. I mean, I see so many cases on a daily basis where people actually want to plan for the liabilities which may come, unforeseen liabilities which we may not even be able to imagine. Sometimes there are some civil liabilities which can come. Divorces, marital disputes are very common. So many families now want to plan for a situation where, in case if the marriage goes wrong, or if there are any liabilities today, as a director there could be some liability, professionals would have the liability, doctors would have certain kind of liability. So how do you protect that? So the one way to do is that create a private trust, make it in such a manner that you are not controlling the trust. Obviously this has to be irrevocable one, because revocable will not give you, let you achieve those objectives. Create this trust and transfer some of those assets into this trust. So all the assets which is already gone into this trust will not be subject to such litigation. The banks will not have a power to ask you to call back, provided it is done properly, it is done well in time. So obviously the court will look at the intent and all process, okay, why it was done. Provided we have done it properly, the structuring is good, one may be able to protect a large part of their wealth through these liabilities. Okay, so business liabilities, a lot of SMEs and business owners do give personal guarantees. So one basic question which comes times again is, what do I do if I've already given a personal guarantee? How do I plan for it? So there's a whole process of doing this. Okay. Um, so we can take that question separately because it's a detailed part of it. But I mean, in a nutshell, what point I want to drive here is that uh, the asset protection or ring fencing, as we call it, is something which is reality. Many families are doing that. Uh, Trust is a structure which helps us achieve, but important thing is it has to be done well in time. It has to be done before this process proceedings start. The sooner it is done, the more valid your structure will look like. So if you are somebody who foresee this, or you just want to plan for such situation, one can go ahead and create such a trust which will help in protecting the personal wealth from these kind of the liabilities. Okay, moving on to next point, estate planning for cross-border families. Now, this is again very common these days. One branch of family has moved out and they are either in US, UK, or various different other part of the world. How does one plan for the various taxes which may hit? Estate taxes and inheritance tax I'll talk about in the next point. So how does one plan for this, especially US, which actually taxes on based on global income? So there's again a planning which can be done through trust structure. There's a structuring which can be done. It's again a case to case basis. The whole idea is that you keep these assets one step away from the person we're talking about. You create a structure in such a way that the assets are not linked to this individual for whom we are doing the planning, so that it does not add to his or her wealth. Okay, this again, as I said, tailor-made, specific, but cross-border families would need some kind of advanced estate planning for the reasons that they do not want the whole money to come to them at one go through a will. and then it gets added to their net worth, and in future they may end up paying a larger amount of taxes, which can be planned if done in a proper way, and again, as I said, well in time. Okay, as I said, estate and inheritance tax. Now, this is something was in India till 1985. It was abolished. In very brief, this is basically a tax levied on the estate of a deceased person. So when a person passes away, the government would have certain estate taxes. In India, we don't have, but there are Western countries, including US, UK, and some of the other European countries, where this tax is levied. Okay. So on the whole net worth, on the whole estate, government would say, okay, this whatever 10%, 20%, 30%. UK has a 40%. Okay, these taxes are being charged on the whole wealth, not on the income. So if somebody dies with $10 million, and if the estate taxes are, let's say, 30%, keeping aside whatever is the exemption amount, which could be X amount, on the net after that, that percentage of tax is levied. Okay. Now this can be huge amount, and a lot of time one may not have a liquidity to pay for this, especially in cases where there's a huge high value bungalow or high value house, uh, but the liquidity may not be that high. How do you plan for that? Okay. So again, one needs to plan well in advance. Trust structure is again something which works very well because, as I said, you pay taxes on what you own on your last day. Whatever you have already transferred before you go and leave this world is will not be subject to the estate taxes. Okay, there are certain conditions to this. There are certain countries which have a clawback option if done within certain period of death. Like let's say for a UK, there's a 7-year clawback period. Okay, in a staggered manner, this clawback applies. But having said that, if one plans this well in advance, one creates a structure well in advance, one may be able to save these taxes. Are we preparing in India to reintroduce this tax? This is anybody's guess. There has been a talk for last at least 5 to 6 years. I've been actively hearing that, but nobody knows when it's going to happen. As I understand, there was discussion happening earlier, but my view is the government is moving in that direction. The whole thought of taxing the super rich extra, so this whole slab of 50 lakh or 1 crore, and putting them in a highest tax bracket in terms of the taxation is actually one step towards that. So the whole thought of taxing the super rich more than the normal is actually happening in a phased manner. So I'm not saying that's going to happen next year or 2 year or 3 year. I don't know. Nobody knows this. But my view is that the as a country we are moving in that direction. At some point of time, we will have a situation where some form of estate tax or a mild form of estate tax may get introduced in near future. So estate taxes and inheritance tax worldwide are planned best with the trust structure. Moving to the next point, business succession planning. Again, many families are doing this where they are unifying, they are bringing their shareholding under one entity. Most of the time, it is the private trust, wherein the promoters' holding are brought under family trust. And that family trust basically is now controlling the whole business, and the individuals are not owning that. The big advantage of that is that it's not now left to the individuals to decide whom they want to sell or what they want to do with the shareholding. Now as a group they decide on this. There are a lot of cases where hostile takeover happens, where one branch of family or one part of family goes out and sells to competitor. Okay, typically a case of imami, may not be the family but friends. And there are a few other cases where the shares are being bought by the competitor, and the competitor takes a control of the business. Now if you create such a structure where the majority of the shareholdings are in the family trust, then family as a whole collectively takes a decision on how to deal with that. It is not left to one branch or one individual of the family to decide on that. So many families are doing this primarily to have a control under one entity. Again, private trust is that entity which works most of the time. Linked to that is a brand and IPR. We have seen businesses have a very high value brand, very high value IPR. So a lot of businesses are actually protecting these brands by putting them into a separate brand trust. The objective is that this particular trust will deal with the brand aspect of it. Okay, so all the rights of usage and everything will be exercised by this trust, and hence the usage and everything and future generation usage and all that can be planned through this particular trust. This again is happening with the mid and the larger business families. Next point, family constitution. Again, not very common, but in the upper strata, this is happening, especially where the family is slightly large, the wealth size is big enough. Okay, we see that family entering into some kind of a family constitution arrangement. Just to define that, this is basically the family making their own rules and regulation, making their own constitution, if I can say so, to how to run the business, how the succession would happen, uh, who would be taking the next in charge, uh, what would be the basic criteria for a person to join the business, uh, how can the daughters, if at all they join the business, uh, if somebody wants to exit, what are the rules for that? Okay, so there are various aspects of the uh, business management which family puts into this family constitution. uh, so a lot of families, including the Dabers and the GMRs, and there are a few others who have done this exercise. Murugappa Group is again known for this one. There are many more who've been doing this now, where they create a whole large family constitution document, and everybody has to abide by that. Okay, so it's a very interesting work. It takes a year and a half, or maybe more sometimes, to conclude this. It involves meeting and discussing the aspect with each family member. I did for one of the family around 3 years back. It took us a year and a half almost to complete that. Almost there were 30 odd family members who were to be interviewed, and then everything was to be brought under one document. So that's again something which many families, I mean, some of the larger families are doing this. Uh, Next is a provision for children with special needs. This is again a very specific trust, if I can say so. These kind of trusts are made in a situation where a family has a special needs child or a minor child, or somebody who may not be able to manage himself or his financial affair. Uh, a trust is made so that this trust provides for the basic financial requirement after the parents are not there. For families with special needs, it basically works in a way that the money during life or through a will after life is put into this kind of a trust, and the trustees are given clear instruction on how the money would be spent, which are the entities or care homes, or what are the medical requirements, where what are his monthly expenses. So the the whole process is that because this special needs person will not be able to manage his or her own affair, and these days you may not be able to trust the family members, and maybe somebody may not be willing to do this. So then you create such a trust where this kind of a trust would provide for the financial needs, and the trustees along with certain other people around would be able to take care of the child we're talking about. The last one, again, trust is again one of the popular structure to do a philanthropy, because through this you can again reach out and have those objectives, go ahead and talk about, I mean, capture all your desires relating to philanthropy in this trust, and after you, maybe during your life and after you, this can be implemented. Okay, so moving on, this is the last one from me. This is basically some of the wealth organizing tips which all of us should imbibe and should try to take care and implement in our life. As I said, first one, ensure nominations and joint account wherever possible. There are places where only a family member can be nominee. Be aware about that. Insurance has a concept of beneficial nominee. Okay, and so on and so forth. So go ahead and understand, and for sure do these nomination. Prepare asset and liability register. This is very critical because I've seen in my previous assignment, where in case if the assets are not properly captured in a place, it's very difficult for the executor of the will to collect all the information about the assets, where all the monies are lying, especially when the money is lent. I had a case where a person had actually given a loan to a friend of his, a decent amount loan, a builder. Okay, and when this person passed away, this friend refused. He straight away said, no, there's no such money payable, because this money was paid in cash and nowhere there was a record for it. Okay, so one should prepare asset register and also a liability register, so that the whole process of handling the estate after demise is a easier one and a smooth one. Digitize all your assets, nominate someone to access after demise. Digital asset is again something a lot of us do not give enough importance. And these days, when you have a cryptocurrencies, you have e-wallets, a lot of our wealth actually is lying in digital form. uh, I actually wrote an article recently on money control on this topic, and it was taken very well, where the whole process of actually ensuring that your documents are first of all digitized, and secondly, all your digital assets are being passed on to your legal heirs in a proper manner. So when one is doing a will, it is advisable now that you also mention how your digital asset will be dealt with. Your Facebook account, your LinkedIn account, your various logs in, login. Okay, if you own one of those cryptocurrencies, how do they be passed on? Many times we miss this. Complete legal and property investment and paperwork, needless to say, very critical. One should definitely during life complete all these, otherwise it becomes a very big issue to deal with. Resolve the family disputes during your life. Do not leave them to your legatees. You do not want them to go around court and fight. As far as possible, solve those cases. uh, I know it's difficult to do, but we've seen so many cases. Legatees do not want to get into those mess, so try to clear all that. Close, consolidate whatever assets you don't need. Look at them. You might have opened an account which is close to your office, but you don't go that anywhere, or in a particular city. You may want to close those accounts. If you're somebody, you've got multiple properties, you may want to gift some of them to your children during your life. Not a bad idea. Gifting some of the assets during your life can be again one of the process of consolidating. Okay, and last and the important one, plan for inheritance. Write a will, if need be, create a trust. Do those steps, take those steps during your life, so that the whole process of passing on wealth is smooth and hassle free. So with this, I conclude my session. uh, if you have questions, happy to take that.
Thank you, Shailendra ji.
My pleasure.
It was very enjoyable hearing you, and also you touched on aspects which are different from the usual, and also many new things were heard and understood.
Sure.
You know, uh, I can always take question and answers if I remember as any, and pass it on to Shailendra ji.
Yeah. Sure.
Whilst they are coming in, if I can ask you a question myself.
Sure.
In a will, in the event, can you put in a will? Sometimes what happens, the father makes a will.
Mm-hmm.
Everything should go to the wife.
Right.
Sometimes the wife passes before the father,
Correct.
the husband, or sometimes God forbid, but sometimes they may pass very close.
Yeah. Yes.
Same time also.
Yes.
So can you put that? I would like to give everything to my better half.
Mm-hmm.
So if she is not there, then it should be distributed like that.
Absolutely. That is how the will should ideally be written. You should say that I'm giving this to my spouse, and if she predeceases me, then to my children in so and so manner. Okay. Sometimes we may also write the word not only predeceases, if she passes away within 90 days or 120 days. Okay. So that it should not happen that the whole process is done and unfortunately she also passes away. Then you have to do the whole process again. Okay. So we can use those words in such a manner that this can be actually passed on to the next generation. in case if such a eventuality happens. So that can be captured in the will writing. That's the important question, actually, important part of it.
So it can be made subject to.
Absolutely, absolutely. If he or she predeceases, then it goes to so and so. If she predeceases, we can write up to 2, 3 subsequent. Okay.
Okay.
Both of them can die together or stuff like
Yeah, I
that.
have a question. Shailendra, thank you very much for that very easy to understand presentation, a topic that lots of people are not very comfortable talking about, even with being child and father or
Sure.
children and parents.
Sure.
But it's really an important one. What
Right.
are your views on the new Hindu law? So I understand that there was a Hindu law that didn't favor marriage daughters particularly, but now there's been some change. Is it possible to throw some light on what those changes are and what really what does that mean in writing in this document?
Sure. So the succession law in Hindu, if I go back, basically the ancestral property of the Hindus and the assets lying in the HUF, which is Hindu Undivided Family, the daughters were excluded from that. Okay, not the personal property. So let's say if I have to pass on to my family, it will go. But whatever is ancestral and the HUF was, the daughters were excluded from there. But there was an amendment which has happened in 2005. After that, the daughters got the right equal to the son. Okay, and also they can become a co-partner. So which means that the co-partnership rights have been given to daughters. They can also become a karta if the daughter is the eldest. There's been a judgment passed on that also, because that was something which was a gray area for quite some time. But there is a now judgment in that favor, where if the daughter is the eldest, then she can even become a karta. She can be a co-partner. So daughters have been given an equal right, okay, in the family, Hindu family's ancestral property and the properties lying in the HUF. So that's the current situation as far as the succession law goes for the Hindu family, especially for the daughters. Right?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation, sir.
My pleasure.
In the case of a trust, can the managing trustee and the beneficiary be all from foreign country? They're Indians, but have a foreign nationality?
Okay, the beneficiaries can be, there is no restriction on the beneficiaries. Okay, but when you're making a trustee, then one should avoid making foreign people, or rather the NRIs also, as the trustees. Even if you're making that, do not make majority of the trustees as the NRIs. I mean, do not make NRIs as the majority of the trustees. Why? Because two reasons. One is, for the trustee to be eligible to a trustee, he should be able to spend considerable time in India. That's one of the criteria for a trustee. Okay. Secondly, the moment you make a majority of trustee as NRIs as a majority of trustee, then the control of the trust may move outside India. So from the control perspective, okay, this may be questioned. Okay, while there is no specific which says that the NRIs cannot become a trustee or stuff like that. Okay, but because of these two reasons, it is advisable that one may actually keep only residents as a trustee, and if at all you want to have a NRIs as a trustee, then they should not be the majority of that. So if there are 3 trustees, then let only 1% be NRI, rest 2 be a resident individual. But having said that, the trustees can be beneficiaries, settler can be beneficiaries. Okay, till the time the trust does not become a sham, because a lot of time the structure is such that the whole trust does not look authentic, because the same person is created, same person is controlling, and same person is beneficiaries. Okay, one has to be careful while making the trust. But if you have a multiple trustees, you have a multiple beneficiaries, and not being controlled by just one person, okay, then the trust would be acceptable for that.
Just a small follow-up question.
Please.
Many of the mutual funds and others do not accept investments from the US nationals and the banks particularly.
Right.
Does it apply in the case of a trust when the settlers passes away and the trustee and the beneficiaries are all foreign nationals? Would those restrictions be applying to them also for bank accounts, etc., or the trust is treated as an Indian entity and not as a foreign entity?
To my mind, it will apply because they are looking for the ultimate beneficiaries these days. They have a form wherein you will have to fill in the ultimate beneficiaries. So the ultimate beneficiaries and their nationality also has to be filled in. But having said that, you can still create a structure where there are other beneficiaries who are resident in Indian. Okay, and if one of them is a US person, okay, then you can still say that just there's one person who's a US. Okay, the others are resident Indian. But if you are in a situation where all of them are US nationals, then obviously the bank or the mutual fund companies will object for that, because then it's just a pass-through entity. Trust is basically a pass-through entity. But if you have a structure where there are mix of resident and non-resident, I mean US and non-US, then your structure would be all right.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks.
Any more questions? You know, any more questions?
Can I ask one more question, Vicky?
Yes, of course.
Please.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Sir, would the same rules apply to HUF account also?
Sorry, come again.
For the HUF account, also similar kind of restrictions will apply?
See, in HUF, anyway, the Karta is the one whose identity is taken. Okay, so they are not bothered with the. I mean, they obviously capture the co-partners and the members. Okay, but all the KYCs are done for the Karta. Okay, so for the HUF, your structure may work. Okay.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, Vicky, can I ask a question?
Ramshid, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Sridhar.
Hello.
I just wanted to ask you, you mentioned that you have a will. The will has to be attested by 2 independent witnesses.
Correct.
If in the chance that, say, the witness is predeceased the writer of the will,
Mm-hmm.
what is the position?
Okay, so ideally one should do the will again and have a new witnesses. But I get your question: what if that's not done? Is the will still valid? Okay, so the answer is yes. Will is still valid. Okay, in the absence of the witness not coming to testify or not alive, the court will look at the other circumstances. Okay, of the will writing. So the will still remain valid. If it gets contested, then there are other ways which the court will look at. Okay, but the best thing is to do is, in case if your witness is no more, you should immediately change your will. I mean, update your will and add the new witnesses to that. But the will still remains valid. Will that does not become invalid just because the witnesses has passed away.
Thank you.
Shailendraji,
Mm-hmm.
I've seen in foreign nationals in the US, for example, people are making trust more often than they are doing in India. Even
Absolutely.
Smaller enterprises and maybe amongst individuals also, they are making trust. They need not have a large family with large enterprises. So is it because they have graduated to a higher level of legality, legal understanding there?
I think good question. I mean, you have a very right observation. Not only in US, a lot of other Western countries, even countries like Singapore and all, you will find that somebody who's got even a not that large wealth, maybe $500,000 or a smaller amount also, goes ahead and creates a trust. Okay, there are the reasons for that. Is one is a lot of these countries have estate taxes, inheritance tax. Okay, so one needs to plan for that. So that's the point one. Point number two is that the laws are far more defined, and the incentives for creating a trust is far more clearer. Okay, in these countries. Okay, Whereas in with us, the trust, people are not very, obviously there's no tax incentive which you get except for the estate tax, which you might save, or some small saving here and there. Okay, so there are no immediate benefit which you get out of this. The biggest benefit I talked about is you don't have to go to the court and all those advanced planning which I talked about. Okay, so from that perspective, it makes sense. But in US, because of these taxes, because of these restrictions, okay, and some of the other European countries, people go ahead and do the trust. Also, another point to understand there is that uh, the trust basically helps them in controlling the asset and keeping that under one entity. Okay, so it is also a way of consolidation which people are using internationally. Instead of holding it individually, they are consolidating the family wealth in a trust. And since it's very clear, and internationally also there's a concept of the trustee companies. In India, we don't have the trustee company concept that popular. Okay, and the history is hardly 10-15 years. Okay, so the rules, the laws, the whole history is far more evolved. They've been doing it for 50 and 100 years. So the whole understanding and whole trust on the trust structure is definitely far more in those countries. Okay, because there are companies whose only job is to act as a trustee. In India, the biggest issue is how do I find the right trustee after me, who would ensure that the trust is being managed in the way I desire. Okay, obviously the family member can be trustee. So there are a lot of issues, and we'll see laws hopefully getting more evolved here as well, as more and more people go ahead and create trust. Okay, but internationally this has been done for so long. There are cases, there are judgment which has come in on this. People understand this concept very well. Okay, so that's, to my mind, is the reason why internationally people do trust more than in India.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Sure.
Vicky, can I just ask a short question, please?
Yes, Jamshed.
Yeah. Yeah. Hi, Shailendra. Sorry
Hello,
again.
sir.
Regarding the attestation of the will, will of the person who makes the will,
Sure.
does the person who attests need to know what is in the will?
Good question. Not really. He just needs to see you signing a will. I mean, if let's say you're making a will, then your witness only needs to see where you are signing, and he actually witnesses your signature. He need not see the content of the will. Okay. Also, since you asked this question, as I said, there has to be two witnesses. Okay. Both the witnesses have to be together along with you. So all the three should be together, okay, and then executing this document. It should not happen that I have signed my document, I send to a friend A to his house, he witnesses, document comes back, I send to friend B, he witnesses. No, that's not right. Because tomorrow when a court will ask, Mr. A, did you see he signing in your presence? He will say, no, the document was sent to me. The case is gone. Okay. So both the witnesses has to be there actually witnessing your signature in the true sense. Okay. Not just the signature, but they have to be physically there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Nice question, Jamshed. And anybody else?